This is a special topic on requisite resources for digital curation, presented by Kari Smith from Global Archivist. Using the three-legged stool developed by Kinney and McGovern in 2003, we can think about what management tools we have to assist us in developing sustainable digital curation programs. In this video, we're going to look at a variety of cost models and associated projects and tools. The Blue Ribbon Task Force on Sustainable Digital Preservation and Access was launched in late 2007 by the National Science Foundation and the Andrew W. Mellon Foundation. This was in partnership with the Library of Congress, the Joint Information Systems Committee of the UK, the Council on Library and Information Resources, and the National Archives and Records Administration in the United States. The task force was commissioned to explore the economic sustainability challenge of digital preservation and access. They looked at the value, so what is the case for use of this material, incentives for the beneficiaries and the owners of content, and the roles, who is responsible. The four domain areas that they looked into were scholarly discourse, research data, commercially owned cultural content, and collectively produced content like on the web. Although records and archives held across the United States were acknowledged as needing sustainable preservation, there was an assumption that these challenges were already met. The final report from the Blue Ribbon Task Force on Sustainable Digital Preservation and Access, called Sustainable Economics for a Digital Planet, Ensuring Long-Term Access to Digital Information, was a two-year effort focusing on the critical economic challenges of preserving an ever-increasing amount of information and digital objects. The final report was published in February 2010. One of the key findings was that sustainable economics for digital preservation is not just about finding more funds. It is about building an economic activity firmly rooted in a compelling value proposition, clear incentives to act, and well-defined preservation roles and responsibilities. Summary recommendations of the report include to create sustainable friendly policy, preservation mandates as appropriate, to invest in or seed preservation infrastructure, fund the modeling and prototyping of preservation infrastructure approaches, to create preservation-aware communities, convene expert communities to address the selection and preservation of materials for which there is no obvious stewardship, web material, and digital orphans as examples. To reform regulation, national and international copyright legislation needs to support digital preservation needs. To raise awareness by promoting digital preservation skills, and to take individual responsibility to provide non-exclusive rights to preserve and distribute created content, and by proactively participating in professional societies and relevant organizations to create stewardship good practice. In developing a reference model for sustainable strategy, we can go back and think about some of the other findings that came out of the first part of the task force work, which was looking at the actual cost and cost models. One of the difficulties in identifying appropriate economic models, they say, is not just a matter of finding funding or setting a price. In many institutions and enterprises, systemic challenges create the barriers for sustainable digital access and preservations. These can include inadequacy of funding models to address long-term access and preservation needs. Often we can have one-time funding, but not ongoing funding. There can be confusion and/or lack of alignment between stakeholders' roles and responsibilities with respect to digital access and preservation. It's often the case that those who create and use digital information are distinct from those who serve as its stewards and support its preservation and access. Consequently, the costs are not necessarily shouldered by those who benefit and can lead to inadequate economic models for sustainability. Complacency that current practices are good enough is definitely one thing that we see continuing. The urgency of developing sustainable economic models for digital information is not uniformly appreciated. And there's also this fear that digital access and preservation is just too big to take on. Now remember that this work was happening in 2008 and 9 and published in 10, but I think we can all agree that this is still a myth that's out there. Also, there's sort of general agreement that in its entirety, digital preservation is a big problem. The Curation Costs Exchange, CCX, is a community-owned platform which helps organizations of any kind assess the costs of curation practices through comparison and analysis. The CCX aims to provide real information about costs to help make more informed investments in digital curation. The Curation Cost Exchange comes out of the collaboration to clarify the cost for curation, the 4C project, which was part and funded by the EU. On their website, you can get information of understanding costs. So this is what are basic cost concepts, looking at cost models, what are the cost drivers, and looking at sustainability planning. The digital curation sustainability model is another of the 4C projects. The DCSM consists of 4 sections, and when used in combination as starting points for discussion, the outcome should enable the creation of a sustainable strategy. The 4 sections are sustainability context, investment lifecycle, sustainability variables, and uncertainties or risk management. In the center of this are your digital assets. So the sustainability context has 3 key areas: digital assets, organization, and stakeholders. The investment lifecycle, which incorporates the core focus of the model on digital curation and makes explicit the need for periodic investment to maintain or increase the value of the digital assets. The sustainability variables are what you see on the star. This sets out 5 issues that must be tackled and actions that should be taken to ensure that digital assets are likely to remain well managed and accessible over time. And then uncertainties, risk management, which acknowledge that no sustainable strategy can anticipate every issue that may arise, either as a threat or as an opportunity. Both of these types of risks, the negative and the positive, seen at the bottom of the model in the gradated white to dark area, can partly be mitigated by contingency planning and having risk management strategies in place. The report is available online and includes all the information to describe the sustainability model. Another outcome of the 4C project was a roadmap. The 6 messages in the roadmap have been carefully considered to effect a step change in attitudes over the next 5 years. This was written in 2015. It starts with a focus on the cost of digital curation, but the endpoint and the goal is to bring about a change in the way that all organizations think about and sustainably manage their digital assets. So 1, identify the value of digital assets and make choices. 2, demand and choose more efficient systems. 3, develop scalable services and infrastructure. 4, design digital curation as a sustainable service. 5, make funding dependent on costing digital assets across the whole life cycle. And 6, be collaborative and transparent to try to drive down the costs. Their vision for 5 years' time, which would have been 2020, is that it will be easier to design or procure a more cost-effective and efficient digital curation service because of the costs, benefits, and the business cases for doing so will be more widely understood across the curation lifecycle and by all relevant stakeholders. Cost modeling will be part of the planning and management activities of all digital repositories. So I believe that that's still very much a goal that we have. The LIFE project, which was to bring digital preservation to life, was the life cycle information for e-literature. This was a project looking at the life cycle of the collection and preservation of digital material. The project was a collaboration between the University College London Library Services and the British Library and was funded by the UK Joint Information Systems Committee. So there were 3 components of LIFE. Life 1 examined the life cycles of key digital collections at UCL and the British Library and established the individual stages in the cycle. These stages were then costed to show the full financial commitment of collecting digital materials over the long term. The first phase of life made a major contribution to understanding the long-term cost of digital preservation, which was an essential step in helping institutions plan for the future. The life work models the digital life cycle and calculates the cost of preserving digital information for future years. Organizations can apply this process in order to understand costs and plan effectively for the preservation of their digital collections. The second phase of the LIFE project, Life 2, has refined the LIFE model, adding 3 new exemplar case studies to further build on Life 1. So what we're seeing here is the Life 3 model for costs. This is a predictive costing tool, and it's based upon a refined version of the LIFE model produced in phase 2, but it follows a collection of additional case studies and survey data. So this has enabled the model to cover a wider range of preservation scenarios, including sound, web, and e-journal archiving, in addition to print. This will help institutions and researchers address these concerns, reducing the financial and preservation risks, and allow decision makers to assess a range of options in order to achieve effective preservation while operating within financial restraints. So one of the things that we see when we look at this LIFE model is that there is cost for creation or purchase. So that's kind of a one-time cost. And then we have acquisition, ingest, bitstream preservation, content preservation, and access. And all of these have a T by them, so that's over time. So acquisition, what they've done is they've laid out multiple aspects and various things of acquisition that have a cost associated with them. The same thing with ingest, bitstream preservation, content preservation, and access. You can see the LIFE predictive costing tool still online. So another cost that we don't often talk about is the cost of inaction. What if we don't curate our collections? What if our collections are on audio and video media that will not last? So the cost of inaction calculator is a tool created by AVPreserves that allows you to create multiple scenarios to understand the cost of investment already spent in the creation of AV assets, the cost of storage of the media, the cost of reformatting or digitizing an item, and the time horizon at the end of which reformatting will no longer be available because of obsolete or scarcity of equipment and skilled people to reformat. What the graphs depict over on the right side are the total amount of assets you have, the realistic quantity that you can afford to reformat within your time frame that you set, and in the black is the quantity of AV media carriers and recordings that will be lost completely because time will run out in order to do this. The tool website provides an example web case to walk through and also to use the tool. So in order to understand what the requisite resources for digital curation are, we can look at our three-legged stool developed by McGovern and Kenny in 2003 again. We know the organizational leg. This is asking us, what do we have? The technology resources, what kinds of technologies will we need to use in order to manage that content? And the resources leg, what are the financial and human resources that we need? This is the leg that has been the least developed in terms of the solid three-legged stool. So in order to understand our resources, as a recap, we need to understand what is our responsibility? What is our content? What previous resources and costs have gone into creating the content that we now steward? What are the value propositions for stakeholders? And we can create a roundtable for radical collaboration in order to develop our sustainable strategy. Thank you for listening to this special topic on requisite resources for digital curation, presented by Kari Smith, Archival Consultant at Global Archivist. You can find more information available about digital preservation management tools at the website.